Just before we get into the video today, I do want to say that it's brought to you by me, or rather by another channel that I do called Business Plays. That channel is about business.
Ah yes, the good old screw the poor mentality.
But it's actually interesting. We look at the most epic failures and times things went wrong, but also little known successes. Generally just the weirdest and most interesting stuff I could find from the business world, like why the £50 note in the UK is kinda just for criminals. Stuff like that. It's more laid back than this channel, throwing a good amount of silliness and fun at you, along with some facts. Check it out through the link below, and let's get into today's video. What is a road? It's a long strip of blacktop used by vehicles to travel from point A to point B. A strip of cracked, frozen highway in winter or steamy asphalt in the summer. Oftentimes, there's nothing poetic about it, just a whole lot of hot pitch molded to the ground in service of our grand industrialization. But for certain highways, and those who travel upon them, it goes a little deeper than that. For today's geographics, let me tell you about one of those special roads, US Highway 66, often referred to as the Mother Road or the High Street of America. Route 66 is one of those points on a map, or really a line, I suppose, which has transcended physical constraints and entered the metaphysical space reserved for myths, legends, and icons. What other highway has been so widely celebrated in music, literature, and film? But before we get to the impact of the Mother Road on popular culture, let's cover the basics. What is the history of this ubiquitous highway, and what made driving across it so special? The story of Route 66 began in 1926 when the Bureau of Public Roads launched the nation's first federal highway system. Like other highways, the path of Route 66 was cobbled together from existing local, state, and national roads. The highway quickly became a popular route because of the active promotion of the US 66 Highway Association, which advertised it as the shortest, best, and most scenic route from Chicago through St. Louis to Los Angeles. The Mother Road stretched 2,400 miles from the shores of Lake Michigan to the land of milk and honey, i.e. California. Route 66 rolled through the hills of Missouri, Kansas' mining district, the open plains of Oklahoma, the ranch lands of Texas, the arid mesas of New Mexico, and the stunning desert landscapes of Arizona. Few roads in the western USA can claim to pass through such a collection of states. Since its completion, Route 66 has acted like manna from heaven for local entrepreneurs. Small businesses have sprung up like mushrooms, especially in rural and isolated communities, offering fuel, lodging, and food to weary drivers. When the Great Depression hit, a vast migration of unemployed families took place across Route 66. They were looking for a fortune, or just simply a job, some pathway out to the west, mainly to California. Ironically, the increased traffic provided plenty of commercial opportunities for the multitude of mom-and-pop businesses on Route 66, which ultimately suffered less than other sectors during the Depression. Then World War II came along, causing a steep decline in civilian and tourist traffic, though not necessarily a slump in overall business. The Mother Road became vital for the military, which used it as a transport corridor to move troops and supplies across the United States. This was a golden age of motels, as they saw an increase in occupancy, especially with servicemen and their families. When the war ended, traffic began to increase as fuel rationing and travel restrictions for civilians were lifted. Automobile ownership in the US doubled from 1945 to 1955, with registration numbers growing from 25.8 million to 52.1 million. With the Axis powers defeated and the industrial complex churning better than ever, Americans could now enjoy better and cheaper cars. They also had more leisure time, more disposable income, and 100% fewer wars. It's no wonder that Route 66 saw its tourism peak in these post-war years as families hit the road to visit the Grand Canyon, Disneyland, or the beaches of Southern California. The highway quickly shed its bleak reputation as the exodus route for the disaffected masses in the Great Depression. Route 66 became a symbol of all-American vitality, a tourist attraction in its own right, with characteristic diners and motels signaled by characteristic billboards and neon signs. Unfortunately, the popularity of Route 66 had a flip side. overcrowding. This led to inefficiencies and high maintenance costs. President Eisenhower, as a former general, knew the importance of maintaining a well-functioning network of roads in order to mobilize a nation's military and to keep its economy running. As a World War II vet, he had admired the advantages of the German Autobahn system. Inspired by the roads he once sought to conquer, Eisenhower supported a 1956 bill to construct the new system of high-speed, limited-access, four-lane divided highways, the modern U.S. interstate system. Over the next 3 decades, 5 new interstates gradually replaced Route 66. And just as the interstates were making 66 redundant, the old mom-and-pop businesses gave way to larger economic concerns: branded gasoline stations linked to large oil companies, motel chains, and restaurant franchises. The decline was slow, but inevitable. In 1984, Interstate 40 allowed motorists to bypass the last active section of Route 66. This led to the official decommissioning of the Mother Road in 1985, impacting countless businesses and communities all along the road. But the historic highway wasn't done yet. Private and public organizations started to campaign to preserve and commemorate the road. Parts of Route 66 received new designations as state or national scenic byways, attracting a new wave of tourism and reinvigorating local business. In 1990, the United States Congress passed the Route 66 Study Act of 1990. It recognized that the road had become a symbol of the American people's heritage of travel and their legacy of seeking a better life. A result of the 1990 Act was the creation of the National Park Service Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program, which facilitates the preservation of the most significant and representative historic sites along the route. It is thanks to the NPS program that even today one can embark on a trip through America that feels like a bit of a trip through time. And that's exactly what we're going to do next. So join me as we retrace Route 66 from Chicago to California, making some interesting stops along the way. Let's pretend it's 1985, the year in which Route 66 was officially decommissioned. Let's pretend you're called Sal and Dean or Thelma and Louise. It's time to embark on your own road trip across Route 66 from east to west before it closes for good. The historic starting point is Grant Park in Chicago, Illinois, but we'll soon be out of the windy city and onto a landscape of cultivated fields and pastures lined by hedgerows and railroad tracks. The flat surroundings are easy on the eyes, and before they get too monotonous, you can spot in the distance the first of our stops, in which we'll pay homage to the Route 66 landmarks. You might consider them relics today, but they are icons in their own right. We're in the town of Cicero, and there he is, Paul Bunyan, a huge muffler man proudly holding his equally oversized hot dog with both his hands and a satisfied grin on his face. A muffler man is basically a giant fiberglass statue, typically built on the roadside for advertising purposes, and our friend Paul may be the most recognizable of all. Inspired by mythical character Paul Bunyan with an A, this Bunyan with an O is the 19-foot advertising sign to a hot dog stand owned by World War II veteran Hamlet Stevens. Stevens had him originally built on the roof of his fast food joint before lowering it to street level, allowing children to climb on top of it. You don't know it yet, but Stevens will end up closing his restaurant and Bunyan will be relocated to Atlanta, Illinois. As we bid adieu to the hot dog guy, we turn on our 1985 radio and enjoy one of the top 100 Billboard hits of the year. Maybe it's Easy Lover by Phil Collins. Now we enter Missouri. Here we'll be driving through the hills and mountains of the Ozark Mountains. Small towns and cities blend into one another across wooded, gently rolling hills and valleys covered in lush foliage. Creek and river crossings are commonplace, and many historic bridges are still in place. But we can't drive on forever. We need to take a rest, and what better place than one of the motels that became synonymous with life on Route 66. It's the Wagon Wheel Motel in Cuba, Missouri. Identified by its landmark neon sign, the Wagon Wheel Motel, Cafe and Station started out in 1936 as a mom-and-pop food, fuel, and lodging establishment. By 1939, the AAA travel directory, the Yelp of the day, sung its praises as follows. Wagon wheel cabins on US 66, the east side of town. Very well furnished, gas heat, fans in summer, rates $2.50 to $3 per day for 2 persons. This is a home away from home. Splendid surroundings. Very good. The The Kansas stretch of Route 66 is only 14 miles long, but this segment of the Mother Road was vital to local lead mining operations. If you didn't travel so fast, you could stop for a slice of watermelon and a famous barbecue sandwich at Williams' store in Riverton. The diner was popular in the 30s and 40s thanks to its regulation croquet court, a sight more congruous in Wonderland rather than Oz or even in Kansas, to be honest. Next up is Oklahoma, and you're halfway through your journey where east meets west, and surely part of the surroundings feel and look like something out of a Western movie, like your next stop would be Ed Galloway's Totem Pole Park. Galloway was one of Oklahoma's premier folk artists who dedicated 24 years of his life to the construction of this park. Between 1937 and 1948, he created a 90-foot-tall main totem pole heavily carved with bas-relief designs that were inspired by Native American lore, made of red sandstone and sitting on a large three-dimensional turtle. Taking a look inside, you see that the pole is hollow and the plastered interior features murals of mountain and lake scenes and bird totems. At the very top, the cone is open to the sky. Through the opening, you can see that the light is changing rapidly, so it's time to get behind the wheel before it gets too dark. The next state you're going to drive through is Texas, cutting through the region primarily known as the Panhandle. You would know you are in Texas even without the signs telling you, as the landscape is dotted with grain silos, oil rigs, and cattle ranches. It's time to refuel again, and what better place to do so than the town of McLean. During the 1940s and 50s, this little panhandle town was host to 22 auto-related businesses, most of them service stations. But don't think these were your ordinary petrol pumps. These stations had style. Many of them were shaped like cottages, sometimes even in Tudor Revival style. And most of the town's economy was all geared around services for travelers. McLean offered motels like the Cactus Inn, cafes, restaurants, and even a theater, the Avalon. The town also supported a bra manufacturing company. That explains the sign you saw driving into McLean, which welcomed you to the uplift capital of the world. Despite the optimistic statements on the billboard, you can't help but notice that McLean today is pretty run down. The elderly gas station attendant explains that the town was one of the many victims of the new Interstate 40, which bypassed many a dwelling on Route 66. You have the feeling you'll drive through many places with a similar fate. But your tank's now full, and New Mexico beckons. Here, Route 66 winds across arid mesas, railroad towns, tribal communities, and designated historical places rich in native Spanish and American history. One of those places is Pueblo of Santo Domingo, or Kiowa in the native Carson language, located between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. In the early 17th century, this town became the provincial capital for Spanish colonizers who had formed an alliance with the local Pueblo people against Comanche and Apache raiders. Throughout the centuries, the locals have protected their traditions, their crafts, and their festivals. Next is a drive along the 35th parallel in Arizona. Here, the real protagonists are stunning natural attractions like the Meteor Crater or the Grand Canyon. But today, you decide to stop for some photos at the Painted Desert. 94,000 acres of badlands sounds like a barren canvas on paper, but this landscape is enlivened by rocks in every hue, lavender fading into grey, orange and pink exploding into layers of red. The hues remind you of the colourful attire of the local Navajos, only here the patterns are the result of millions of years of patient creation, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, floods and sunlight, all combining their shape-shifting might to gift us the Painted Desert. You would love to see the effect of the setting sun on those dunes, but it's time to go. It's the last leg of the journey, the last state to cross. California, the West Coast, where the promised land for many travelers in the 1930s lay. Route 66 eventually will reach its conclusion in Santa Monica, a laid-back ocean town outside Los Angeles. You decide to make a quick stop in South Pasadena to pay homage to the historic Rialto Theater. The theater opens for vaudeville and movies on October the 17th, 1925. The theater was in danger of being demolished for a parking lot in 1977, but it was saved by a petition circulated by Pasadena residents. The following year, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. By the time you get there, August 1985, in case you forgot, the theater is a popular venue for concerts, art house films, and midnight movies. Route 66 exists beyond the realm of this earth as an idea. The idea that the opportunity to change or improve is constant, ready to be seized. It's not going to be an easy journey, but if you take it, at least you'll find croquet and pancakes along the way. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos just like this a couple of times a week. Also, please do check out that channel I mentioned at the beginning, Business Blaze, linking to it below, and thank you for watching.